live. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is Thursday. It's almost June. It's May. I do have to check my phone. May 28th.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're excited because we have one of our very own right in our backyard, Brian Keating, who is joining us today live on Bellevue TV for our series called Great Minds in Quarantine. And I'm joined by my co-host, Steve Chappel, who is blessing us with his presence from the islands. He's in Hawaii. That's where he's been quarantining. But Brian, you've been here in La Jolla. How is it being a brilliant mind here, kind of stuck, sheltering in place, when you have big projects going on, I believe, in Chile?
Yeah.
So, you know, your students to attend to in your science. How's it going?
Well, it's getting more challenging by the day. You know, I'm starting to have quarantine envy because, you know, from your Italian roots, quarantine meant 40, and now we're up to what, day 80 of our shelter in place order, so to speak. But luckily, the universe waits for no person, and we're slowly getting the labs back in order, and we're getting allowances to go into the labs at UCSD.
Mm-hmm.
And we have on the other side of the world where the telescopes are. So behind me is a picture of the United States station at the bottom of the world in Antarctica, at the South Pole, Antarctica. I'll move over. You can see it says geographic South Pole. That's where one of my projects is located. And then the others are in Chile, in the Atacama Desert of Chile, which is one of the highest, driest areas in the world. I'll put up a picture of what that looks like now. And it's just a stunning landscape to be in. But the problem is Chile is now in the going into fall, and soon will be in winter. And if this coronavirus gets worse in cold weather, they could be locked down for 3 months. And then when they're out of their quarantine, then it could be returning to the Northern Hemisphere. So I'm worried about that. So yeah, it's a logistical, serious challenge, that's for sure.
So for those of you that don't know, Brian is, oh gosh, you guys are going to laugh at me because this is me trying to even explain what he does as a scientist. You are a physicist, correct?
Yes, I'm an astrophysicist and an author.
Okay, so I like that you have your book there, because I too, I'm going to give a little plug. I think the last time we saw each other was up at General Atomics, which is a James Bond movie.
Yeah, I know. It's so cool. I gave a talk there, and I was fortunate to do so because in the audience was Freeman Dyson, who is now deceased. And so it's a great treat and honor that I was able to present to one of my heroes. I had him on my podcast several times, and I miss him tremendously. So that was the last time I got to speak with him in person.
So you're an astrophysicist, and you're with UCSD, right? So you're part of the Chancellor's, is it scholar or distinguished?
Yes. Yeah, I hold the Chancellor's Distinguished Professorship in Physics. That's my full title, yes.
So that's your title over there. And then you're also an author with this book, Losing the Nobel Prize, which I can't wait to talk about. And then you have your own podcast. I mean, and we can't forget you're a father, right? You're a father in quarantine.
Yes.
You also get to homeschool 2 younger children, I believe.
Yes, I've got 5 younger children, but yes.
Wow. Got your hands full, my friend.
Just 5, yeah, just 5. It's a good start.
So which hat would you like to talk about first? Do you want to talk about your role at UCSD, your projects, your book? Where do you want to go?
Well, I think I'd like to talk about my team and the people that make what I do so much fun. And really it comes down to the privilege of being able to work with people that I learn from every day, just as we learn from our children, those of us that do have children. We learn from our students. And I was thinking about this kind of and actually trying to describe it to one of my kids. That when you have, 2 people, there's only one connection between those 2 people, but you have 3, now you can have a connection between person number 1, person number 2, but also person 2 and 3. So now there's 3 connections. And then if it grows as this permutation. So actually by the time you get up to 4 or 5 people, you can have exponential growth in the connections between people and among people. And I love that fact. And I love being able to work with people, young people especially, from literally all over the world. I have a project in Antarctica, colleagues in Australia, students from Uganda, Thailand. I've had students from Israel and all over America. And that's really the most rewarding thing is being a part of this multi-generational family of scientists. And that is my greatest joy outside of my home life, which is obviously incredibly important to me.
I have a question. I've got to jump back to the zoo and the steam and San Diego Unified. Brian, how do you sleep? Or do you just stay awake like somebody in space, like Kurt Vonnegut in space or something?
Well, we kind of maintain Dracula hours as astronomers. We want to be up at night and asleep during the morning, and but unfortunately, the kids don't usually cooperate with that. So typically, I try to do a lot of things. I just had on a mindfulness expert, Dr. Judd Brewer, who's a world famous neuroscientist and psychiatrist at Brown University, where I got my PhD, and he has a book about addictions and cravings and all the different ways. But one of the superpowers that he thinks is possible to unleash is power of mindful meditation in order to achieve, if not all the healing powers that sleep can convey, but certainly to recharge yourself. And so I try to do that. I'm not really great at it. One of my kids will come in and say, "Now you're going to meditate," in the middle of it. So that's not always
That's
easy.
awesome. I mean, you can have the guests on that solve the issues or address the issues of your own life or your own curiosity.
I know. I said it's like an hour of free therapy for me. It saved me $400.
One of my older brothers was a Caltech PhD, but he ran the geology department over at Brown. But anyway, he was more in
wow.
rounds. All right.
Oh, very good.
All right, I'm going to check out and look at the giraffes here live. It's all live all over the world.
Wow. Enjoy it.
Well, we're going to talk physics here, so.
Enjoy it.
Science by Amanda. Awesome. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your projects that are in Chile and that are in Patagonia. Is that correct? Or
it's in the Atacama Desert. So there's one in Antarctica. So on the cover of the book over my shoulder, you'll see on this side, you'll see a picture of a telescope, a small device, and then a big telescope. Yeah, so that's the same one. So on the left is a large telescope. On the right is a smaller telescope. That's at the South Pole, Antarctica. And it's taken during a nighttime period down there, which lasts 6 months. So we just, we're about to go into summer here in the Northern Hemisphere. And that is when the days are the longest that they'll be in the Northern Hemisphere, but that's when they're the shortest in the Southern Hemisphere. And once you go south of Patagonia in the Southern Hemisphere, at this time of year, the sun is down. The sun set on March 21st in Antarctica and will not come above the horizon until September 21st. So it will be quite dark right about now. It's not quite peak darkness, just as like when the sun sets over, outside of Bella Vista, you don't see it get instantly dark like that. It takes a little time.
Those trees, we're working on
over the glider port. Yeah, if someone doesn't hit you or the building, you can see through the building. But nevertheless, I've enjoyed many green flashes up there. And actually, the green flash at the South Pole, which I've never witnessed because that requires you stay for 9 months at the South Pole because no planes get in or out. The green flash can last a day at the South Pole.
Oh, wow.
The sun makes a circle. It's slowly circling around. Eventually it gets under the horizon. So it's quite
green flash. Or no, I think they don't exist anymore. You could drink green flash beer.
Oh, the beer. Yeah, you can bring one down there. I'm sure you get it. Get a lot of there's plenty of beer at the South Pole.
So again, for myself and all those non-scientists, right now, no sun from March to September.
Correct.
So this is your paradise or how is it? And just like we're in quarantine and we feel, we've been kind of stuck as a scientist, like you love the stars, but do you kind of feel stuck or how does that affect you because you're not seeing the sun?
Right. You're not seeing the sun. You're seeing these, really crazy images. Well, again, I have never been there in the winter time.
Look at you. You're a pro.
Oh yeah. I've been doing Zoom, for a whole 10 months now. But at the South Pole, you have to commit to spending, almost a year of your life total down there if you want to be there over the winter. But, there is one benefit. Actually, there's multiple benefits. Okay. So one benefit is that there's no COVID-19 on the entire continent of Antarctica. So it's the only continent, which means it's a landmass. There's actually rock underneath all the ice. 2 miles down beneath the ice, you'll hit a rock. So it's a real, honest to goodness, one of the 7 continents. There's not one confirmed case of COVID down there. It's so isolated, and the people that go there are so healthy, studly and studettes. that they really suffer no physical impediments in a typical year. But
would you be included in that group?
no, I would not. I am, I joked to the doctor who I had on my show that, he helped me lose, drop 5 pounds, from my double chin to my stomach. So I dropped it all the way down. But the other good thing about the South Pole is that nobody can reach you there. So the IRS can't reach you there. The credit card companies can't reach you there. Your people can't, get an invoice from. So it has its virtues. But no, I've never been there. People do enjoy the isolation. In fact, there's 45 to 55 people there right now at the South Pole, all by themselves, and they actually relish it. In the beginning, they can't wait for the rest of the teams to leave and for them to be left alone. And sometimes they don't want to leave. One of our people who ran my experiment for 4 or 5 years, he'd been there 10 or 15 years in a row. His permanent address was the South Pole pretty much.
That's incredible. So you've got one there, and then in Chile is where the satellite is. Oops.
Sorry, I did that. Yeah, this video behind me is in Chile at 17,200 feet in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile. And it's showing a time-lapse video shot by one of my friends, Deborah Kellner, in a film for the Simons Foundation about this project called the Simons Observatory. And it shows the Milky Way galaxy is now arching overhead in the middle of the night. And the Milky Way is so much more pronounced. I don't know if you've ever been to the Southern Hemisphere, but seeing the Milky Way from the Southern Hemisphere, you really notice that it's not mostly bright. It's actually very dark. You see all those like kind of smudgy, smoky patterns that you see.
I feel those like are on, what is it, like Star Tours or no?
Yeah, that's right. Those are actual. There's not just places where there's no stars. There's actually the same number of stars as anywhere else, but there's just much more dust and obscuration. And we've learned a tremendous amount about our galaxy almost by accident in the last few years. And a lot of that has come from these projects in the Southern Hemisphere.
No, I lived in Brazil, but I wasn't really paying attention to the stars when I was there. That's not to say that I can't return and give more time.
Yeah.
And so now going to your book, right? Losing the Nobel Prize. I know that we just had on Tuesday, Anthony Davis. I mean, UCSD is kicking ass and taking names, right? When it comes to all these prizes and awards, but there's also that argument, and I think that's what your book is about, that sometimes people are so focused on a prize that they lose sight, or it almost creates this, you become myopic, right? You're just focused, this tunnel vision, that all these other possibilities might be lost. Can you tell us about your book and why you wrote it and what your journey was?
Yeah, I wrote it because I wanted to really understand how time itself began. And working with colleagues, I developed a project called the BICEP project, which is over my shoulder over here, which is a telescope that could basically see back in time as far as humanly possible, using not waves of visible light that the human eye can see, or that an ordinary telescope that you might be familiar with. Here's a picture of the telescope used by the first optical astronomer in history. These are Galileo's telescopes housed in the Museum of Galileo outside of Florence, or inside of Florence. In his house, I got to visit and actually hold a conference in. It looks like this, a beautiful villa. My gosh. This was his prison, actually. He had a Bella Vista from his prison. He was famously sentenced to a life imprisonment after denouncing the Catholic Church's favorite explanation for the organization of the universe. And not comparing myself to Galileo, but we both had ambition. And some of those ambitions revolved around getting, in his case, monetary awards and fame. And for me, it was to win the most superlative prize that exists, the Nobel Prize. The Nobel Prize is inarguably the most important scientific award, but maybe even award period. I mean, I saw last week, 77 Nobel laureates were, condemning some decision made by the Trump administration. And, you wouldn't hear that, with apologies to Anthony, or, you wouldn't hear 77 Pulitzer Prize winners do this, or 75 Olympic medalists. It's only Nobel Prize winners get, kind of brought out to opine on important matters of the day. Mm-hmm. And so I think that illustrates through its reflected glory the importance that the Nobel Prize has. And I tried to, candidly win it at almost all costs, to my own mental and physical health in some ways, because it became almost like an obsession to prove to myself that I was among science's most elite. And the story is a memoir of what it feels like to come up short of your dreams, which I only realized, might be the purpose of dreams, because it's very rare that you continually, win and just be superlative in any field, right? I mean, how many teams have won the World Series every year it's ever existed? None, right? How many football teams, even the Patriots lose every now and then. So it's, and the Nobel Prize, you only win it once. It's basically only one human being out of, millions of physicists who have ever lived has ever won it twice. And so I started thinking about that and what it feels like to maybe not achieve your dreams as being a more frequent occurrence than achieving them. And so this is a story of how you handle setback with humility so as to avoid humiliation.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting because you're talking about like, you have ambition and I get it because I'm very ambitious as well, right? We're goal-driven people. Yeah. And we have, we have really strong work ethic. So you have ambition, you have your goal, and you're thinking that this medal is going to validate you. But we also realize that is sometimes when you reach that goal, and if that was your only validation, you're only getting, it's like, women that are in a relationship with men and, I get my self-worth from this validation of this relationship, or for you, you're saying the medal. Then what? How do you remain relevant once you in that goal?
Or making money. People make money, and I came to see it as through the lens of almost a religious kind of pursuit, in that people, it's very hard to get people, once they've tasted a little fame or a little success, to kind of to be comfortable with where they're at. Look, here's the Nobel Prize ceremony where you've got literally the king of Sweden, who then puts this golden medallion, and you have to bow down to this golden medallion. And what does a golden medallion have engraved on it? It has a gilded graven image of the patriarch of this religion that I call Nobelism in the book. So it's really a memoir. My book is a memoir of what it feels like to pursue things, and also try to quest to understand, how is the cosmos organized? How did time come to be from a period of existence where there was no time? I mean, it's a very fascinating thing that I get the honor of being paid to do. And that's the best thing, right? When you get paid to do something that you would do for free. But I always say, don't tell Gavin Newsom, or he might take me up on it.
Because he's totally watching right now.
I'm sure he is. He's got a Bella Vista of his own.
He's part of my fan club. He's a president. Yeah. So Brian, when you wrote the book, and then all of a sudden you had, not all of a sudden, but then the natural progression was to start doing podcasts, right? So do you have, I think you have a show at noon. Is that what's going on, or?
Well, yeah. So what I started to do during COVID, when COVID first struck, I realized I had many of my friends and collaborators and just people I'm very interested in talking to and that I respect so much, that their book tours had been canceled. And so I reached out to my publisher and other publishers to get to offer my services, basically to promote their books in what I call a pandemic podcast, where I'd have people on the show to talk about the books as if they were doing a book tour. And I've been able to have amazing guests and visitors. And I just did one right before this call, and doing one afterwards. And the one afterwards is kind of a spin-off of my podcast. So I realized, I don't have a huge audience. Not too many people know about it, although I hope everybody will like and subscribe it. And I'll put a link to it here.
And I do have, it's on your webpage?
It's not on my webpage. If you go to YouTube and look up Brian Keating, Dr. Brian Keating, or Brian Keating, you'll find it. Okay. My YouTube, it'll say, it'll have some videos there, but it's not linked directly yet. I'm planning to do that soon. So, but people should sign up for my mailing list, because oftentimes I'll give away things from my explorations in astronomy, ranging from meteorites to telescopes and little stuffed dolls of famous astronomers. So my mailing list is at briankeating.com, and I'll ask you to join when
Yeah, we'll definitely have that information in the notes. And I think it's great for kids, right? So you realized I think it's beautiful. It's kind of like what we did with Bellevue TV, right? It's like, well, how do we remain of service and how do we keep people together?
Yeah.
So, we have all of our community where we like to share their stories here on Bellevue TV, and then our musicians, right? We have
Hmm.
live music, and all of a sudden these musicians who would be there twice a week don't have a platform to share
Mm.
their talents as well. And so it's
That's,
really awesome what you're doing, giving a platform for all of these incredible authors that are in your circle to share their story. And also, I think with the kids, I always, I have a son, and how cool is it? And we talked about this, you possibly coming up to Bella Vista on that big terrace and
yeah.
doing a night of stargazing. So,
Yeah, with a telescope set up and some meteorites. Yeah, I would love to do that and talk about the passion. The greatest thing about astronomy is that every one of us is born with a telescope, two telescopes in our head, which is our eyes. Our eyes are telescopes that allow us to see things not only distant from us in space, but also in time. So even with just the naked eye, there's a tremendous amount of knowledge that we can learn about the cosmos. And that's what makes it so appealing to kids. And another thing is that it's inherently non-political. It's like people get so riled up about social media and politics. And I always say there's no Republican constellation and Democratic constellation. It's all available, and it should be free of politics, and it gives people a place to relax and get away from politics. And I think that's why people like the podcast that I'm doing.
mm-hmm. And are those podcasts, do you have some that are geared towards children? So for
Um,
instance, like as mom, I mean, let's be real, right? We have to homeschool our kids, and we're on like T-10 school days, and I've got to hopefully go reopen a business, and
yeah. And camp is canceled, right?
camps are canceled. Like the mom network, we are freaking out. So would that
No,
be
the dad network is too. I'm on all these
right?
Facebook groups, parenting under quarantine. It's very challenging.
Right.
We don't specifically, I wouldn't say I specifically put out stuff for young children. There are better avenues that, people can go to for that. My things are more for thinkers and intellectuals that have works of nonfiction that are out. Occasionally I do science fiction. So I had Peter Diamandis on. I had a gentleman who had the #1 or 2 book on Amazon named Greg Zuckerman on, who wrote this book about Jim Simons. So I'll usually have on authors and thinkers and very abstract subjects, such as the ones I study. But yeah, certainly the classic stuff that's on even PBS and so forth, those are more educationally focused. Mine is more kind of trade and practice and just interesting leaders and ideas. I mean, Peter Diamandis is not a scientist, but he thinks like a rocket scientist, and he operates his business in a way like that. So yeah, these are things that I think are of use to the more, adult community and so forth, but certainly precocious kids in their, teens and late preteens could even appreciate it.
And so now I'm going to ask you what it's been like parenting and keeping your team together. We spoke briefly just before we went live, right? And you were saying like, okay, I've got, and sorry, I don't know, I had 2 in my head, but 5 children during shelter in place. And then you have your projects that are on 2 different continents, in addition to the US. And your students. So what does that look like? Because this series is in fact called Great Minds in Quarantine. So how has your life changed, and what are you doing? And have you got any tips?
Yeah, well, I have really used it to try to take the pressure off myself in some sense, to say that even when I'm talking to my group, so we have a weekly group meeting where all 25 of us get together and everyone updates. And I always say at the end, if you're struggling or whatever, please let me know and I'll try to help out in any way I can, financial, time, resources, energy, whatever I can provide you. But even though I always say, keep up the great work, I don't mean that as a pressure. I don't want you to feel like if you don't have the same output that you did under quarantine. Now, these are mostly people in their 20s and younger in some cases, so they don't have the same constraints that I do. I don't think any of them have any children that I know about, but some are married. But nevertheless, I feel like it's incorrect to really expect them to maintain productivity. I mean, right now we're in the midst of this global pandemic. We've been forced to close up certain things. We have, the specter of unknown continuing maybe return of this. So it's more mental self-care. I've been doing a lot of, exercising, trying to read, trying to engage with. So the podcast has been a great outlet for me because it's made me basically read a book a week since the beginning of March. I've read 14 books, also listening to them on audio. I like to go deep and get, things that no one's ever talked about. And I have a signature kind of style where I'll ask people, what are the 5, I ask them questions about books, about their habits, their techniques, and their philosophy. And I always ask them a version. So the podcast is called Into the Impossible.
Into the Impossible. Okay.
And that's one of Sir Arthur C. Clarke is known for having many, many of these kind of aphorism, quips, laws. And one of them is there's no distinction between sufficiently advanced technology and magic. So any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. That was one of his laws. Another one was the only way to find out what is possible is to venture a bit out into the impossible. And so the last question I always ask, and I'm going to ask you, I'm going to flip the tables on you and ask you this question. I'm going to say, what, when you were 20, seemed impossible, but by virtue of the fact that you made effort, took action, had strategies, and accomplished tactics, now seems possible because you went into the impossible? So why don't you answer that now? What it's kind of advice to your former self using Sir Arthur C. Clarke's.
Let's just paint the picture, because when I was 20, right, I was living in Madrid.
Oh, wow.
So I went to UCSD and I spent my junior year studying abroad in Madrid. So maybe the impossible. So looking back then, that's a really deep question, but I always valued international travel and education and the opportunity. And luckily my parents were able to let me have that experience, coupled with me achieving academically to be able to go there. And I always thought it'd be amazing to give back, but I didn't know how I would do it. And in my mind, I said, okay, when I was younger, I was a dancer. So I danced in Russia, Australia, New Zealand. I lived in Spain. I ended up living in Brazil. And I knew I want to give back, but I want to give back through the arts and education and international travel. And so here I am now, something that I thought was impossible. I'm actually starting to create a platform and then eventually a foundation that will be able to provide the scholarship so that others can follow and have those experiences. So I guess, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess, kind of those skills and even doing what you're doing now, I always think, well, how could I be spending my time if I wasn't doing these podcasts or doing interviews with great minds? But actually, it's very applicable to what I do as a scientist. I mean, it's very rare that I go down to Chile or Antarctica. I've only been to Antarctica twice, which I know is twice as many times as the average person. But nevertheless, it's not that often you get to go down there. So most of the time, you're not doing that. So what are you doing? Part of what you're doing, I feel like there's an obligation for scientists to be able to communicate what they do to the general public, because you people pay our salaries through your tax dollars. And so I have an obligation to communicate that so that you have ROI, you have return on what you invested. Unfortunately, many scientists either don't say what I just said because they feel like, well, I don't want this guy or her to speak about my research, or even her, she's terrible, or whatever. I mean, scientists can be very petty and selfish and jealous and so forth, as any other person can be. But on the other hand, I feel like if you don't spend the time learning how to actually do the hard work of communicating, of presenting visualizations and appealing to the public, then you're just talking to your technical colleagues. It won't be of service.
Right.
And so the onus is on scientists to develop some degree of responsibility to learn and take lessons. I've had speaking coaches. I've taken, acting lessons to perfect when I had to give a TED talk. I was honored to give a TED talk. I'll put a link to it here. You can send that out too. I was very proud of it, but I got a lot of coaching. One of the great things about TED is that they provide a speaking, acting, presentation coaching. And there are books written about this, even by TED themselves, Chris Anderson. So
Right.
I want my colleagues, and I always think, so with my students, I make them, you know, it's not too hard, but I do make them get out of their shells and present something completely orthogonal to what they're used to talking about. And in doing so, they develop these meta skills of you know, being able to communicate something that to somebody that maybe they didn't understand, but also to perfect their presentation skills. I even, you know, I have a lot of students from foreign countries, China, Thailand. I've actually paid for them to go to Toastmasters because I think it's
that's fantastic.
Yeah, because I think it's important for them to have confidence in their presentation, because when they're speaking, they're representing me as well. And as we know, every talk is a job talk. This is a job talk, right? I mean, I might get a job someday at Bella Vista in the dishwasher. I used to wash dishes, as you might have read in my book. I used to
bring it back on. Well, it's funny because everyone has different styles, and people go, well, do you want to be a talk show, or do you want to be this, or I was like, literally, I'm throwing the cat with my son and jumping on, because for me, it's a totally different style. I'm trying to create a virtual social club where it feels like we're meeting you for the first time. Right? So that gives me a little bit of freedom in my style, and we're like, go with the flow and live. But I do agree that it's so important. And that's one of the things I never thought I would end up right across the street from UCSD. I never thought I would own a social club, and I never thought I'd be serving scientists. Right? One of the big gaps was, okay, I'm serving all these brilliant minds, but I have no idea what they're doing. And so how, like you're saying, how do we get these scientists to be able to articulate to those that aren't, you know, these scientific minds? It's not that we don't want to understand, just sometimes, you know, I lean more towards this style of thinking. It's wonderful that you're out there, and you're not only taking the time and the investment to become a better speaker yourself, but you're being a mentor for the people on your team and these students that maybe are ESL, maybe, you know, English is a second language. So they have two barriers. Maybe it's their fear, you know, their ego, their affective filters for the communication, and then that language. So bravo for just being a leader in that sense. And, you know, as a lot of people are saying, this is a time during uncertainty where leaders are emerging. So I think it's important that people that are watching and learning about you, someone who's from our community, are a leader in ways that maybe they didn't even expect. One being the podcast, right? Keeping people together, being of service, and creating that platform for all those speakers to have their ability to reach an audience and have their book tour. And then also, like you're saying, you know, not putting pressure on your students to produce, but being there as a leader and a mentor for them in this time when mindfulness and health is more important, and then also developing them as clear communicators. I need to go take Toastmasters.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful opportunity that is offered not too far. I think the last one who took Toastmasters, either he or she did it in maybe Sanford Burnham, or maybe a national university, someplace like that.
Okay.
So yeah, there's a lot of different opportunities that we have here that we should take advantage of.
We host, well, when we were open, Brian Leach and the crew from TSRI, which is now, I think, Research Institute, they were doing postdoc open mic night. That was fun because you know, the idea was, again, they had some like celebrity judges, and then they would have the postdocs come and speak about their research.
Right.
Just like it was just another opportunity, another avenue, another platform for them to practice.
Exactly. Yeah, that is well worth it, and people really should avail themselves. I mean, we're so lucky; we have so much, you know, to do, and so many interesting resources we have here in San Diego. It's not, and that was part of the reason I wanted to start working on this Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination,
right?
Which was that, you know, we have the highest density of PhDs and doctors and stuff. I think of any zip code in America is in the 90237, whatever our zip code is. It's the greatest number of PhDs and brainiacs. So I wanted to start something that could, you know, kind of tie these things together with a connection of great minds and great capabilities, great artists, great scientists, and technologists and talk about ways to make the future full of creativity and imagination. And that's what the Arthur C. Clarke Center at UCSD does.
Yeah, it's beautiful because it's UCSD is, you're a pioneer in what you do in your field. And I think UCSD is really trying to be that pioneer in collaboration. And so we're just going to see it as we keep moving forward. What's that behind you?
Oh, this is a picture of the cosmos that you would see if you had microwave eyes. Actually, you'd see something a little bit closer to this. So the orange band that goes across the middle is what a microwave telescope, like my BICEP telescope or the Simons Observatory or Simons Array, will see. Instead of seeing this kind of Milky Way image above my head right now, that's what the Milky Way looks like to the naked eye or in photographic light. But if you had microwave vision, you'd see something like this, where the orange band, so the white stars in the Milky Way, where the Milky Way gets its name, is from the white milky appearance of billions of stars behind me and dust. This is what it looks like to microwave eyes, except it's horizontal instead of vertical now. But this is what you would see if your eyes could see microwave vision. And this is the pattern that we were looking for to reveal what what the universe might have looked like in its earliest possible moments, right after the Big Bang, right after the origin of the universe.
Yeah. And that's really what your book was on too, right? That's what you were searching for, was what it looked like right after the Big Bang.
Yeah, so if you go out and you go to the Bella Vista once it's open again, and you have a pair of sunglasses, you can look at the ocean, and I'm trying to step out of the way here. So light will reflect from the sun off the water and come into your glasses and hopefully get absorbed by the polarizing material that the glasses are made up of. But really what that shows you is that light, when it interacts with matter, so light from the sun interacts with matter, you can learn something about the properties of the light source itself by how polarized it's technically called. And so we try to do the same thing with the cosmos and make an image of how polarized the cosmos is. And we claim that we did it and we were successful. And this, if it had been confirmed, spoiler alert, my book is called Losing the Nobel Prize, but it would have resulted in a Nobel Prize for sure for somebody, if not me, somebody else on that team. And that was not to be. So we want to make sure that we get everything kind of corrected and improved for the next generation of BICEP and the next generation of other experiments like the Simons Observatory.
Brian, do you think that you want to pursue, have you given it up, or do you think it's still a possibility to pursue the Nobel Prize? Where do you stand now?
So no, I haven't necessarily given it up as a possibility if we can correct some of the original challenges that befuddled our quest with BICEP 2 in the book. But it's become no longer a motivating factor in the way that it used to be, as I'm candidly admitting in the book. So that's no longer a motivation for me. And, I'm really trying to make it more pure and about the quest of, scientific pursuit in itself for its own sake, because of what a privilege it is to do this type of science that, we are uniquely qualified and able to do here with this phenomenal team that we happen to have. You're
the Dorian Gray, like art for art's sake, but you're the Dorian Gray of science, science for science sake. I have a question. You've written a book and you're doing podcasts. I know I have a friend who was just like, I have to write a book. And I was like, yeah, but you're really passionate when you speak. How has it been writing a book versus teaching versus doing podcasts? Did you find that you enjoyed one process more than the other?
That's a good question. I feel like what's that?
I said, finally, a good question.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's different skills. One is, kind of relies around, the presentation of very terse material. In the case of being a scientist, you might spend 6 months writing a single sentence or making a single plot. Whereas writing a book, it's more expressive, creative in the sense that you can take liberties because there's no right or wrong answer to say the question of, well, how did you feel when, I suffered the loss of a great friend due to suicide? And, so that's a personal reaction, and wanting to make sure that I understood how to convey that in a way that non-scientists could understand was, that was incredibly important to me. So, I feel like it's one of these things where you develop different skills, and you don't know how the skill of, say, giving public lectures will translate. But I realized, I was talking to a colleague right after I gave a talk or did a podcast with somebody, and this is like the parting wisdom, if any, I can leave you with, is that, she said something like, God gave you two ears and one mouth, and meaning that you should listen twice as much as you talk. And I realized I could even apply that to my guests on the podcast, but also with my colleagues in my scientific life and listening to them. And then I took it one step further. I said, what if I listen to my kids twice as much? So, sometimes as I talk to them, that's an experiment, I'm not willing to go to yet, because I think kids need a lot more, kind of protection, supervision, safety. But there is a similarity between the two, in that there's a type of love that you have to have, obviously platonic in the case of your students, but a love that you have to, love of knowledge and love of our wisdom tradition and how to hand it down, and that we're all part of this great chain. Wow. And with that, I'm going to have to go to my stream.
Yeah. You're headed to your stream. Thank you for your time. I'm so happy we got to do this. And
me too.
And I know we're going to have you back. I would like to have you back with more accomplished scientists than myself that can really delve into the work that you're doing. And then I know we're going to see each other up at the cafe. And let's keep this going. And any way that we can help, connect people to the podcast that you're doing. I mean, this really is, like you're saying, it's about listening and sharing stories and finding those connections of how the mycelium all works together.
Well, best to you. Thank you so much for having me on. I can't wait to see it in person and be back and bring my whole group up there for all the delicious treats that you guys make. And thank you so much for the service you do to the community too, Amanda. This is really so gracious of you to share your resources.
All right. Have a good one.
Bye, Amanda. Ciao. Bye-bye.